Carl Smitty Smith is remembered across Houston's South Side as a man who got rich and feared in the cocaine trade without ever reliably selling cocaine. But most people thought he did, and if anything, he sold the illusion he was a drug kingpin. He dressed like a kingpin, moved like one, and made real money by handing real dealers fake bricks. And when the end came, the way it's told, what caught him wasn't a rival or a task force. It was a bullet from his own friend's gun. Almost none of it sits in an official record. All of it left a mark. Start with what can be checked, because that's the smaller part of this story. Smitty's name lives mostly in oral history, barbershop conversations, comment sections, a handful of grainy photos, and the memories of men who were teenagers in Houston in the late 1980s. There is no trial transcript, no famous indictment, no newspaper front page with his face on it. What exists is a legend, repeated often enough and consistently enough that the shape of it holds even when the details drift. So the honest way to tell it is to anchor the parts that are documented and to be plain about where the record thins out into street memory. The ground is documented. Most accounts place his roots in Hiram Clark, a neighborhood on Houston's southwest side that started as a middle-class white community, and after white flight in the 1970s, filled with black families pushed out of the inner city and later Hispanic immigrants. It sat close to money without ever touching it. The sociologist Stephen Kleinberg described Hiram Clark residents as living beside affluent areas like Meyerland while never sharing in that wealth. That's the emotional weather of the place. Prosperity you could see from your porch and never reach. His name is tied just as often to South Park, a few miles east, and the picture there is the same. Residents have said the opening of the 610 loop and forced integration at the local schools pushed white families out, and by the early 1990s, the area's infrastructure had deteriorated and crime had climbed. Between the two neighborhoods, you get the whole backdrop of his life. Kids coming up in sight of comfort on blocks the city had mostly stopped investing in. You might hear gospel drifting off one porch and gunshots 2 streets over, and both would feel normal. The timing sharpened all of it. Houston in the mid-1980s was coming off an oil bust that gutted the steady work that had held these neighborhoods together. Real jobs dried up, and another economy moved in to fill the vacuum. By the early 1980s, a cheap, smokable form of cocaine had spread through American cities, and police reports of crack were already surfacing in Los Angeles, Oakland, Miami, Chicago, New York, and Houston. The epidemic that followed drove violence and crime through inner city neighborhoods and fed a national wave of tough-on-crime policy. For a teenager watching his own block, the lesson didn't need explaining. The money and the power had moved to the corner. Out of that same pressure, Houston built something it made entirely its own. As the local economy sank, young men in black working-class neighborhoods turned to the streets, and customizing cars became a way to survive and to feel good about themselves. These were slabs, old Cadillacs, and box Chevys wrapped in candy paint, riding on swangers, the wire-spoke rims that jut out past the curb with fifth-wheel mounts, neon-lit trunks, and heavy chrome. Through the late 1980s and into the 90s, the slab became the visual signature of Houston's hip-hop scene, a rolling piece of art and a way to claim status inside the community. To understand Smitty, you have to understand that in his world, the car was a language and presence was a form of money. A man's ride told you who he was supposed to be before he said a word. He learned that language early if the stories hold. Before he sold anything, he moved cars, boosting them, stripping them, running the parts through back channels. People who came up around him say he had a screwdriver on him before he ever had a bank account, that he could open a locked door and be gone without leaving a trail behind. Parking lots were his first classroom. He played football for a stretch, the way a lot of young men did to stay visible and keep options open, but the field was never the plan. What he was really practicing, deal by deal, were the two skills his whole career would run on: reading people and disappearing. The car theft did something else for him too, something more useful than the money it brought in. In that culture, the slab wasn't only transportation, it was a statement, a way of announcing your worth to a whole neighborhood at once. As the story goes, even when the ride under him was stolen, Smitty already understood the psychology of it. If he couldn't own a car that got people talking, he'd cruise it long enough to be seen in it, and the seeing was the point. He was teaching himself early that in Houston, the perception of a thing could be more valuable than the thing itself. That lesson would eventually become the whole business. By his late teens, the car game had given him a foundation, and a bigger idea started to form. Around him, the other young hustlers were all chasing the same thing: weight. Get your hands on a brick, break it down, flip it, stack fast and loud. Houston at the time was one of the South's major pipelines for cocaine coming up from the border, and every crew in every corner of the city was scrambling for a piece of the supply line. Smitty, the way it's told, looked at that scramble and asked a different question than everyone else. What if you never had to touch the product at all? What if the reputation did the selling and the thing inside the wrapper barely mattered? Houston made that question thinkable. With the border only hours south and the interstates cutting straight through the city, cocaine came in heavy through Mexican and Colombian routes, and it moved fast. The men at the top of that trade were building real empires, and everyone below them was fighting over whatever fell off the truck. Most of the young hustlers in his section were trying to catch scraps and turn them into something. As the story is told, Smitty spent that period watching from the side rather than jumping in, studying who got robbed, who got rich, and who got killed, and deciding he wanted none of the risk that came with holding real weight. That idea sounds too clean to be real until you see how easily fake product has fooled people who should have known better. Years later, in a scandal that broke in Dallas, police seized what they logged and made arrests on as cocaine, and the cases fell apart when lab tests showed the seized powder was ground up wallboard, sheetrock. If a police department's own evidence room could be fooled by pressed drywall, a nervous buyer counting cash in a dark parking lot had almost no chance. That is the exact gap Smitty is said to have built a life inside. The first moves were small and quiet. He'd drive out to Dallas or Austin, carry himself like a piece of something much larger, talk fast without ever saying too much, and let people fill in the blanks for him. The gift was the vibe, the way he moved like the trunk was full even when it was empty. As the story goes, he started pulling 10 and 15,000 up front for shipments that were really drywall and flour under convincing wrapping. What made it work was the framing. He never seemed to need the sale. He acted like he was letting you in on something exclusive, doing you a favor, and by the time anyone thought to test what they'd bought, he was already gone. No strings, no returns, none of those early transactions live in a court file, and that's worth saying flatly. This is a figure the documented record barely touches, but the world he supposedly worked in is documented in detail. The collapsed job market, the crack economy, the car culture, the plain fact that fakes could pass, and the people who keep his story alive tend to agree on its shape even when they argue over the specifics. That consistency is a large part of why the legend has held for more than 30 years. By the early 1990s, Smitty had built a look designed to shut down suspicion before it could start. The photograph you can find show a sharply dressed man leaning against luxury cars with captions describing a candy-painted Rolls Royce and Mercedes and a habit of parking on MLK every Sunday just to show off. The people who trade his name online still remember the thick bankroll he seemed to carry everywhere. By the accounts that survive, the rotation was loud on purpose. A candy red Chevy Caprice one night, a pearl white Rolls the next, everything fitted with elbows, loud systems, crushed velvet interiors, gold chains thick enough to notice from across a room, designer glasses worn in the club at midnight, custom tailored fits that made him read more like a music executive than a street figure. The logic underneath the flash was cold and simple. In a business where everyone was watching for a rip, the flashiest man in the room was often the most trusted. If he could afford to stand out that boldly, the reasoning went he had to be connected, and connected men didn't run petty scams. Smitty is said to have used that assumption as armor. He stayed calm, spoke low, never pushed. He let buyers talk themselves into the deal, then let them believe they'd talk them into it. He kept his face in the right rooms. Sunday slab meetups where custom cars lined up like a video shoot, VIP tables where he'd pour champagne and pose next to whatever rapper or out-of-town name happened to be passing through, most of whom barely knew him. One story that gets repeated describes a house on Glen Iris, a piranha tank glowing in the front room, a Rolls Royce sitting in the driveway, the kind of setup that made the whole myth feel confirmed to anyone who saw it. Every sighting fed the story. Nobody could say exactly what he did, and that was the point. Some took him for a cartel middleman, some for a flashy investor with heavy connections. The mystery did more work than any answer ever could have. The generosity was part of the machine, not a break from it. During this stretch, he's said to have thrown private parties that people remembered for years. One birthday celebration in particular, where he pulled up in a Rolls Royce, passed out bottles of Cristal, and made sure everyone in the building left talking about him. He made the party feel like a reward for surviving the hustle, and the men who ran in longer than he had, the OGs who'd seen flashier come and go, tended to give him a quiet kind of respect anyway. He had the cars and the jewelry and the women, but he also had control, and in that world, control was rarer than money. A man who gives freely and never seems to sweat the cost reads as a man who has more than he could ever spend. That reading was exactly what he wanted people to walk away with. The story that lifted him out of local legend and into something bigger is the one about Sandra Denton, Peeper, of the pioneering rap group Salt and Pepper. A widely shared post claims the two dated in the late 1980s, at the height of what it calls Smitty's reign as one of Houston's most feared figures, and points to photos of them together. Men who say they were around back then describe her riding out with him. One account puts the two of them at a packed Memorial Day gathering, Smitty rolling onto the sand in a Ferrari with Pepper stepping out beside him. The relationship has never been documented beyond street accounts, and no memoir confirms it. Some versions push it further, alleging Smitty fathered Denton's son, born in the summer of 1990, a claim that circulates widely and rests on nothing firmer than that same street talk. Whether any of it is literally true almost doesn't matter to the legend. A national celebrity standing next to a local hustler turned him, in the eyes of the streets, into someone who had to be operating near the top. The mechanics of the scam, as it's described, rewarded patience above everything. He'd open a relationship clean, hand a small crew a real brick, something that tested and flipped, so they'd come back convinced they'd found a golden connect. On the second or third deal, once the trust was locked in, the product changed. The fakes weren't thrown together. The story holds that he used drywall, plaster, flour, or pressed baby laxative sealed in tight layers of plastic, sometimes dusted or repackaged so the weight and the smell read as real. And he engineered urgency into every deal. He had to leave town tomorrow. Somebody else was already trying to grab the same load, take it now or lose it. That pressure kept buyers from looking too closely until he was long gone. Online, the shorthand attached to him is blunt, king of the fake bricks, and some posts add that he'd even pay for things with counterfeit money. The nickname has outlived nearly every verifiable fact about the man. What made him genuinely hard to reach was that he rarely showed up himself. The handoff usually went through someone else, a runner, a woman told only to smile and pass a bag, a middleman who believed the deal was real. If it went wrong, the person holding the package couldn't give up a man they didn't actually know. They couldn't name a stash house or a real phone number because they'd never had one. It put layers between Smitty and every transaction. It meant that even the people who got burned often had no one to chase and nothing to point at. He kept moving, and the movement was his own defense. Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, then back to Houston, never leaning on one city too hard, rarely doubling back inside the same month. By the time a buyer pieced together that they'd been finessed, he was already in another city with a different car, a different name, a different number. And ego worked in his favor the whole time. A dealer who'd handed over tens of thousands for press to drywall wasn't going to walk into a police station and report it, because in that world, getting played looked worse than losing the money. Silence protected him better than any weapon could, eh? The discipline showed up in the small things. People who describe him say he never repeated the same mistake twice, never talked too loud, never let a deal turn into a relationship. When a big lick came in, the story goes that he split the money up immediately and pushed pieces of it to people he trusted, so that if anyone ever caught up with him, they'd never get all of it in one place. That instinct is at the center of one anecdote that gets repeated about a motel on the edge of Austin. In that telling, Smitty had driven out for a drop and sent a female runner to make the handoff, but the buyers got paranoid and wanted to test the brick right there in the parking lot. He'd shown up just long enough to feel the energy in the lot shift the wrong way, and instead of pushing through it, he pulled the plug, walked back to his car, and was gone before anyone could argue. There's no way to confirm the story, but it captures the thing his whole run depended on: the willingness to leave money on the table the instant a room stopped feeling safe. One account, told by a man who says he was part of it, describes that same skill turned to a different purpose entirely. As he tells it, a batch of real keys needed to be swapped out of an inventory, and Smitty was the one who could produce dummies convincing enough to make the switch. In that telling, the fakes went where the real product had been, the real product moved on, and nobody could tell the difference until it was far too late to matter. It's an unverifiable story, like most of them are, but it fits the same signature exactly. His edge was never the drugs. It was the counterfeit. His name also anchors one of the era's better-known Houston spots. Regulars from that time credit men like Smitty with turning Carringtons from an ordinary pool hall into a place people still talk about, and a place where, by some accounts, a shootout tied to him became part of the lore. One of the people who has put that world on the record is Keith Babin, another Houston dealer whose own history is documented. Babin has said he sold drugs from 1986 to 1992, served time in federal prison, and was later released, and he went on to record an audiobook about his life in South Park meant to steer young people away from the streets. Folklore and comment sections also link the two of them, describing Smitty as a close friend of Babin's. In those accounts, Shopping with a figure like Smitty came with real fear because everyone knew the Jackboy reputation that trailed him. That word, Jackboy, a robber, is where his story gets genuinely hard to pin down. Depending on who's telling it, Smitty was a dealer, a con man, a stick-up artist, or all three at once. The photos say wealth. The nickname says fraud. The reputation says violence. He seems to have lived comfortably inside that confusion because a man no one can define is a man no one can predict, and unpredictability in that business was survival. For every city that added to the legend, there was a crew adding a name to a list. Men who had handed over serious money for pressed drywall didn't just lose cash. In their own circles, they lost standing, and standing in that world cost as much as money did. The story holds that Smitty felt the shift and adjusted the way a hunted man does. More aliases, burner phones rotated often, never one number for long, meetings taking 2 cities over just to keep his trail cold, at least one car rumored to be armored, drops set on neutral ground on the outskirts of whatever city he was working, always in a spot he picked himself because he'd learned how fast information leaks once money is involved. People who describe him in this stretch talk about a man who could smile and still be watching every exit, who kept his business calls at a distance and ran most of them through trusted girlfriends or silent runners so his own voice stayed off the line. The threats didn't stay abstract. Some crews went looking for him back in Houston. A few sent word through mutual acquaintances, warnings that payback was coming and that the debt hadn't been forgotten. He answered the pressure by riding with people he trusted, men from a small inner circle who could move without drawing attention and knew how to react if a moment turned. He stayed armed. He stopped meeting anyone in a spot they'd expect to find him. And even the people he ran with noticed that he'd shifted into something like survival mode, that the carefree version of him had quietly gone away. You could see the change in his rhythm. He wasn't pulling up to every club and every slab meet up with the same easy energy anymore. He was still out, still spending, still working, but there was a wariness on him that hadn't been there before. The dope game across Texas was tightening at the same time. Task forces stacking indictments, crews flipping on each other, the old lines between allies and enemies starting to blur. He moved like everyone was a potential problem because by then, plenty of them were. The end, as nearly everyone tells it, came on the 610 loop, the freeway of roughly 38 miles that rings inner Houston, begun in the 1950s and completed in 1976. The same loop whose construction had helped reshape the neighborhoods he came from. The most repeated version places it in 1992. According to a widely circulated account, Smitty was from Hiram Clark on the southwest side and was shot in the back of the head by his friend Kenny Bell by accident in the middle of a shootout on a 610 loop that year. Other posts repeat the same core detail more bluntly, that he was shot by his own homie. In the fuller telling, he wasn't alone. Bell was in the passenger seat, a longtime friend who reportedly moved with him on risky plays. Somewhere on that freeway, another car pulled alongside and opened fire without warning. Smitty had no time to swerve. Bell drew and returned fire through the window while the car was still moving, and in the chaos and adrenaline, one of his own rounds struck Smitty in the back of the head. The car drifted across the lanes and came to rest against the concrete median. If that's what happened, the man who spent years staying a step ahead of every enemy was killed by the person sitting right beside him. It has to be said clearly that this is where the record all but vanishes. No indictment, no trial, no confirmed date. Some who claim to have known him can't even agree on the year, placing his death anywhere from 1990 to to 1992. The accidental shooting story is exactly that, a story consistent in its outline, unverified in its facts. It's plausible and it fits the world, but it rests on street accounts and social media posts rather than on anything official. A few retellings also attach a killing to his name, a claim that surfaces without any documentation behind it, and it's part of why the feared half of his reputation has held as firmly as the beloved half. Both halves live entirely in memory. His funeral, by the accounts that survive, matched the life. Slabs rolled deep in the procession, elbows out, systems playing slow Southside music down the street. He was said to be buried in an expensive suit with a diamond pinky ring still on his finger. And one detail gets repeated more than any other, that someone slipped a fake brick into the casket before it closed. Not as an insult, as a nod to the game he'd played better than anyone around him. The damage he's said to have done outlived him. Every fake package that changed hands rippled outward. Buyers tried to reflip worthless product and took the loss twice. Crews collapsed under embarrassment they couldn't explain to their own people. Trust on the streets wore thinner, and hustlers started second-guessing connects they trusted for years. Law enforcement barely touched him while he was alive, because a scam like his left almost nothing to prosecute and no victims willing to come forward. The silence wasn't only fear of the police. Many of the men he burned couldn't stomach admitting they had been taken, because in that world, being finessed didn't just mean losing money. It meant looking weak in front of everyone whose respect they lived on. He seemed to understand that ego could be a stronger lock than any threat, and he built the whole operation around it. Passing off fakes was still a crime, and as the Dallas sheetrock case would later prove, even the labs could be fooled. But you can't build a case on money that quietly disappeared and a man who was already 3 cities away. The younger hustlers, who only knew him from barbershop stories, started trading his name like folklore, half lesson and half warning. Some who came after him tried to run the same play, and none of them had his control. The scam was never really about the drywall. It was about the discipline, the timing, and the nerve to walk away before anyone thought to check. Over time, his name drifted into music, into short online videos, into the kind of retellings that turn a person into a character. In some of them, he's a villain who preyed on his own. In others, he's the man who beat the system right up until the last second. There are people who question how much of the story is even real, and they're not wrong to ask. A great deal of it can't be checked, but almost no one questions that he existed, because the results were real enough to remember. Money changed hands, crews took losses, lives bent around him. Whatever else is exaggerated, the wreckage was not. Today, his story survives mostly online. Instagram posts, YouTube breakdowns, and comment threads where people who were there argue over what's real and what got stretched. The same posts that call him king of the fake bricks also insist he was one of the most feared men in the city. In the channels that cover Houston's underworld, he turns up as something close to a ghost, a name almost everyone recognizes and almost no one can pin down, beloved and feared in the same breath, argued over decades after the fact. That's the honest ending. Carl Smitty Smith is best understood not as a documented kingpin, but as street folklore, a figure the city built to make sense of a particular time and place. The oil bust years, the crack economy, the slab culture, the neighborhoods the city left behind. The specifics bend with every retelling and probably always will. But the world that produced him is real. The fakes that could fool even the police were real. The losses people took were real. He may never have moved a single true kilogram of cocaine, He moved like a man moving tons. And in Houston, that was enough to write his name into the story of the streets and to keep it there long after the man himself became impossible to find.